Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks, failures, and challenges become the stepping stones for growth, clarity, and purpose. I'm your host, Ezekiel, and today we are joined by Alison Gieschen. She is an award-winning author, a lifelong sailor, and the Nautical Novelist. After spending 30 years building and running an internationally successful equestrian program on her family farm in New Jersey, she and her husband made a radical decision. They sold everything they owned to pursue a shared dream of circumnavigating the globe abroad aboard a 43-foot sailboat. To date, they have traveled to 46 countries across 4 continents. Her time battling the open ocean and connecting with remote cultures has inspired a powerful body of work, including her sailing memoir, Riding the Waves of Reality, and her latest novel, The Seven. She joins us today to discuss trading safety for the unknown, facing storms at sea, and the raw process of self-discovery. So, Alison, I am honored and excited to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. So let's dive into it, Alison. For 3 decades, you built a deeply rooted life, raising a family, growing your own food, and running a thriving horse farm in New Jersey. Walking away from a 30-year legacy isn't just a logistical challenge, it's a profound identity shift. So when you were looking at the beautiful, comfortable life you had successfully built, what was the breaking point where you realized that safety was actually holding you back and you absolutely had to cast off the lines into the unknown?
Well, you're right about it being a secure and comfortable lifestyle and a kind of master of our own destinies and accomplishing our goals. And we experienced that for 30 some years. However, I had been a teacher for 20 some years, and 5 miles from my house, they decided to build a $25 million equestrian park. And being that I had a master's in administration and leadership and all this horse experience, I thought, how fun would it be to apply for a job to run this $25 million horse facility, kind of like a dream job? So I applied for it and I got it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the best thing in the world. And it turned out to be the worst thing in the world because the men were evil and they were corrupt and they were stealing money during the building process. And they were misogynist and they treated the women that worked there horribly, to the point where I'd go home in tears every day. And, I tried reporting them and I got in trouble for it. And so what happened is the women banded together and we formed a lawsuit against them and we won. Hands down, it was no contestation. These men were definitely guilty. However, it destroyed my career because I couldn't go back to be a teacher. They wouldn't take me at my current, legally, they had to take me at the salary I left. And because I had been working for so long, they didn't want to pay my salary when they could hire somebody right out of college, for half the money. So I was devastated. And I just went into depression and I curled up, and my kids were all at the age where they were moving out and getting married. And I just felt like I've got nothing left. And that's when my husband looked at me and he said, you know what? It's time. And I said, time for what? And he goes, we're going to fulfill our dream of sailing around the world. Because we met in a sailboat race when I was in my early 20s. And he said, my dream is to sail around the world someday. I was like, mine too. Let's get married. So we did. We got married less than a year later. But all that stuff went on the back burner. And when my husband saw that I was mentally broken, he said, you know what, we're going to do it. So through that devastation and that setback, we made this life-changing decision.
All right. Alison, thank you very much for sharing that story with us. So, you are navigating in a 43-foot sailboat through a literal storm at sea. In that scenario, the chaos is immense and it's out of your control. So I'd like you to tell us about a terrifying, unpredictable storm you've encountered, through this journey of you circumnavigating around the world.
Right. Well, it's been a constant theme. We've been out 8 years, and we've had some really difficult times. And I think the worst was our very first ocean crossing. We prepared, we went to boat shows, listened to seminars. We even did a 1,000-mile training passage out on the ocean in, really rough weather to prepare for this journey. And my husband was a merchant marine, so he was used to being on ships and crossing oceans, but I had no ocean experience. So our very first crossing, which would have been a 1,500-mile passage from the east coast of the U.S. to the Virgin Islands, I said to my husband, I want to do it in a boat rally, because a boat rally, everybody gets together a week before and you go through training seminars. They check your safety equipment. They have a weather router to tell you when the safe time to leave is, and you travel together as a group. I thought, well, how comforting, to do our first ocean crossing with a whole group of other sailors. So we went and we joined this rally. We spent our week preparing, came for the day to leave, and we all set out real early in the morning, and we're all excited, and we're heading down the coast of the U.S., and we had to go down a bit and go across the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is like this river that goes up the East Coast, and it can be notorious, like really rough. So we wanted to go south so we could cross it at the narrowest. And right before we crossed it, we started hearing a sound in our engine, a cavitation in our prop. And Dan is like, I don't think we want to cross an ocean, like start a 2-week passage with something wrong with our boat. So we made the decision to veer back to shore and get it checked out, and then follow everybody as soon as, we fixed it or knew the boat was okay. Well, the problem was, even we pulled the boat out of the water. We had 3 different teams of experts come. Nobody could find anything wrong with our boat. So we put it back in the water, and the weather router called us up one morning and said, listen, you need to cross now because there's storms coming and you're not going to be able to leave for another 2 weeks if you don't cross right now. So we listened to him, and we took off and we crossed the Gulf Stream. It took us 24 hours. It went very smoothly. And then the sun started coming up, and it was my watch. My husband had just relieved, I had just come up and relieved him. He went downstairs to bed. And about 30 minutes later, the sun came up over the horizon. And as it lit up in front of me, I saw this giant wave coming towards me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm holding on, and the boat goes up and over the wave really smoothly. And I thought, well, that didn't feel rough. And then I see another one coming. And again, the boat went up and over the wave. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is how big these waves are. I didn't know it because it was dark. I couldn't see them. So I start panicking, and I'm pounding my foot on the floor because his bunk is right underneath the cockpit. And I'm pounding and I'm screaming, Dan, you got to come up. You got to come up. So he came up, and he's looking at the size of the waves. And he goes, wow, this is unusual. So what was happening was, I don't know if you've seen the movie A Perfect Storm, but there was a storm front coming behind us and a storm front coming in front, and they were converging, and they were pushing the waves together, and the waves were getting bigger and bigger, and the wind was getting stronger, and we were trapped. We couldn't get out of it. So within the next couple of hours, the waves were 18, 20 foot tall, and they were breaking on the bow of our boat. So our whole bow would go underwater. And what happened was we had our dinghy strapped to some teak handrails on the front of the boat. Well, a wave ripped the dinghy out. The dinghy weighed a couple 100 pounds, right? And it had equipment loaded in it. And it ripped the handrails out, and it washed through the lifelines of the boat. So now the dinghy is hanging on the side of the boat, pounding against the boat, and it's still tied to the mast. So it's threatening to take our mast off our boat. So it was absolute chaos. And Dan had to clip in and go up and cut it free. And when he cut that line and I saw the dinghy go in the water, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. And I thought, if he goes in, I'm just jumping in with him, because I am not going to stay on this boat alone in this storm. So he came back to the cockpit, and we're trying to breathe and, figure out what to do. And all of a sudden we heard a pounding, and our anchor came loose. And now our anchor is pounding and threatening to put a hole in the bow of the boat. So we had to go back up on deck, clip back in, put on the jack lines, get up to the bow of the boat. And when the boat would go up over the wave and come down like this, he would actually be airborne. He would separate from the boat and land back on the boat. And he had to get the anchor tied back in, those conditions. So once he came back, I'm like, we got to do something that, we're not going to survive this. So we called using our sat phone at the time. We didn't have Starlink or anything really reliable, but we got a hold of my cousin, who's a sailor. And we said, look up the weather and tell us what we need to do. So he looked at the weather. He says, you've got to get off the ocean now. He goes, it's only going to get worse. You've got to turn around and you've got to go back the way you came. You've got to get off the ocean. So we're like, all right, we got to do it. So we turned the boat, tacked, started heading out. And fortunately, it got us out of the storm. And within an hour, the waves started subsiding. The wind went down, the sun came out, and a pod of dolphins surrounded our boat and started leaping out of the water, joyful. You made the right decision. We're like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up 5 days later a 800-mile loop 20 miles from where we started. And it just was
Wow.
absolutely devastating. And a lot of people would have quit. They would have just said, okay, this is not for me. I'm not doing this again. But my husband is very strong. And he's like, no, the insurance paid for all the damage. We had $14,000 of damage in the boat. They paid everything. But what it did to me on the inside was really devastating. It just made me have absolute anxiety. So the next time we did actually cross, every time the weather started getting worse, I started having panic attacks, and I'm just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So we are in the Virgin Islands, and we are in a harbor with about 100 boats. And I was getting ready to tell Dan, I can't do this. You're going to have to get crew, cross the oceans. I'll meet you, but the stress is not worth it to me. And then we see a boat 3 boats away, who was the man that took us on the 1,000-mile training passage that I told you about. And he was 3 boats away, and he was our mentor. And we had no way that, the earth is 80% covered by water. The fact that he was 3 boats away, my mentor.
Mhm.
So we called him on the radio and said, hi, John, this is Dan and Allison. We're here. And he's like, oh, come on over, come on over. So we go over, and he's talking to us, and he goes, so Allison, how's it going? And I just start like tearing up. I'm like, John, it's terrible. We got in this awful storm, and now I don't think I can do this anymore. And he looks at me and he starts laughing. I'm like, why are you laughing? And he goes, do you know how lucky you are? And I'm like, no. And he goes, first of all, your boat did great. Your husband did great. You're still out here. He goes, do you know how many people would have given up and never gone out again? They would just call it quits. And he goes, and the chances of you ever being in that scenario again and that kind of storm is like 0. He goes, you made it. You've got this. And he was the only person in the world that could have looked at me and told me that. And I would have believed him because he's written 5 books. I listened to all his seminars. He survived like 3 hurricanes and 2 typhoons on a boat in the ocean. So for him to tell me that, I internalized it, and it gave me the courage to continue.
Wow. Wow. What a story. I mean, it's the type of stories you see in these adventure movies. I mean, it's so fascinating, like to believe this actually happened to you in real
I
life.
know. The
Wow.
coincidence is incredible. Like the odds of that happening. So I have to believe that was more than odds. It was more than fate. That was destiny for me to be there at that time.
Absolutely. Netflix ought to make a movie about this. Indeed,
You're about the
it's
5th
really
person that's told me that. You're like, everybody says, you got to make a movie out of this. I'm on a boat in the middle of
such a
the ocean.
wonderful story. Wow. So, Alison, how did that sheer physical helplessness, how did it force you to confront your own internal illusions of control?
Well, I had to come to grips with the fact that I was going to have fear, that I was going to have anxiety, but I had to make myself be okay with that. I had to get to a place where I was going to accept my feelings and work on them, not give up because of them. And it's been a struggle because we've had some other really horrible things happen. I mean, crossing the Pacific Ocean, when we left Panama and came across the Pacific, it was a 4,000-mile trip. Again, we had another horrible incident where we lost our steering and our autopilot because the Chinese fishing fleets out there, they leave remnants of their nets after they break the oceans and kill all the fish and take everything. And their nets are 60 miles long, and everything they catch in their net dies. It doesn't matter if it's a whale, a dolphin, a sea turtle, they kill everything. And if they get their nets mangled, they just cut them free and leave them in the ocean. Sailboats with the long rudders catch them. And that's what happened to us. And we were 500 miles from shore, and we lost our autopilot and our steering. So Dan, and it was rough. There was 10-foot waves, 25-knot winds, and we're getting tossed around like a toy ship in a bathtub. So Dan got the steering fixed, and we had to hand steer 600 miles across the Pacific, and it was horrible. And once again, I think that going through those situations and surviving them builds my strength, and it builds my confidence, and it builds my faith that, yeah, even when things get tough, we still get through them.
All right. All right. Indeed, it's an adventure, an adventurous life you guys are living out there, as sailors, circumnavigating the world. And thank you for sharing these stories. It's so fascinating to hear them. So, Alison, living at sea, it requires rigorous self-reliance, from managing solar arrays and inverters to maintaining digital connections via satellite equipment like Starlink Mini. And by the way, that's what I'm actually using right now. So, how has this deep physical disconnection, from mainland infrastructure and traditional comforts. How has it shifted your perspective on what humanity actually needs to survive and find fulfillment?
Well, it has totally changed my perspective as somebody who grew up being able to jump in a car, go to a grocery store, turn on a tap and get water. We have to make every drop of water we drink from the ocean. So when our water maker goes down, it's a crisis. Sometimes we go for months and we can't find a decent grocery store. So we just have to plan ahead, and it has made me appreciate so much everything. Like every time I can go to a grocery store and buy a cucumber and a carrot and an onion, I appreciate it and I'm thankful for it. Anytime we go to like we'll get an Airbnb or something and I can take a hot shower, I sit there into the water because now when I use a shower, every drop counts, and I wash my hair and I turn the shower off and I rinse it, and I don't use conditioner because I'd have to rinse that too. So all of the luxuries that I took for granted, I now see as treasures. And it just really shifts your perspective about life. Like nothing comes easy and everything is a gift. And I think that's a good way to live because most people don't experience that. Like, yeah, this life is tough, but I wake up and I look out at the world around me, and even after 8 years, I pinch myself. I'm like, this is so beautiful. And we worked so hard to get here and we appreciate every moment. So I guess my appreciation of things and places and experiences and living life the way we do, it's amazing.
All right, all right. So
I'm sorry for
you
all the
are
boats going. I'm sorry for all the boats going by. There's not that many.
not a problem. That's really, it's really fascinating. Today, I've not really seen any boat pass me by today, from where I'm sitting. But to see that, having this conversation with you, I could actually see a real life boat pass by. It's so
Yeah.
cool,
A
to be
noisy
honest.
one. Over the sailboat, you wouldn't hear it, but the motorboats have these big engines and they're all noisy.
I see. Okay, so let's talk about your book, your memoir. You wrote Riding the Waves of Reality, and I'd like us to talk about it. So, firstly, what was this book about? Give us a general overview of its content, and tell us what gave you the motivation or inspiration to write this book.
Well, as somebody who is an author and a writer, this adventure has just been, like you said, as like a movie playing out. So it's been very easy to sit down and just start from the beginning and write the story. So, Riding the Waves of Reality, one is about our decision to sail around the world, how we sold our house, everything we owned, and moving aboard the boat. And then the first couple of years. So it talks about the storm that we went through and meeting John at that wonderful time. And so our adventures up to like the first 3 years. And then Riding the Waves of Reality 2 is about our time in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean is so historical and amazing. And as we speak, my husband is down editing book number 3, which is all about coming across the Pacific and our time in the Pacific. So 3 will be coming out shortly, and I'm really excited about it because I think it's the most interesting one yet.
Okay, so all of these fascinating stories, including the one you just shared, are included in the book series.
Yes.
Interesting. That's sounds like a really adventurous read for the listeners who would go check it out. So, you write about tales of turmoil and triumph. So, what's one catastrophic failure you experienced, on the water that shattered your romanticized vision of sailing around the world, and how did you rebuild your confidence to keep going afterward?
So obviously, the first story I told you was pretty devastating. There was another one as
Mm.
well. We were heading to the island of Madeira, which is off the coast of Europe, and it's supposed to be a very beautiful island. And everybody's like, you got to go to Madeira. It's so beautiful. Like, okay. And so we were waiting for our weather window. The weather was supposed to be perfect, 12 to 15 knots, small waves. So we headed out. And sure enough, the weather predictors were dead wrong. And there were some other boats that we could see on our AIS, which points out where other ships are, within like a 20-mile radius. There's a bunch of other boats out there too. And the weather starts getting worse and worse. One boat of the boats actually called a mayday. They were in trouble. And I knew that things were getting bad if that boat was calling mayday. We were in really, really big trouble. And then all of a sudden we heard a sound up on the deck, and our infurling system that rolls our mainsail in and out, something went wrong with
Mhm.
it and something broke. So my husband had to go up on the deck of the boat again and the sail rips free, and he's up there trying to lash the sail to the mast in the wind and the waves. And again, it was a situation that's so scary for me because if he goes overboard, I'm just jumping with him. I'm not even going to try. So, I'm really scared for him, and I'm trying to get the boat stabilized so he can get this thing lashed, and he's got to use, two hands, and he's losing halyards, and there's whipping back and forth and smacking him in the face. And I'm just watching all this horrified. And he gets everything secured and comes back in, and he goes, "We can't go to Madeira. We've got to turn around. We now don't have a mainsail, and there's not going to be anywhere to repair it on this little island." So we turned around, and 24 hours later, we ended up on the shore of Portugal. And we knew that there was a very large marina that could do repairs. So we headed to Lagos, Portugal. We had to take our mast off our boat and fix the entire furling system. And it took us 4 months to get all this work done because it was in the middle of COVID. And every time the workers started, somebody would get COVID, and then they'd have to quarantine for 10 days. And it really kind of sapped us, financially, and another setback, another failure. But once we overcame it and set back out again, like all of those
Mhm.
feelings just dissipate. They just go away. And you're so thankful to have made it through and be back out there. And we really have just 3 requirements: still alive, still in love, and still afloat. And if we can meet those 3, it's all good.
Yeah, fantastic. So I like to know exactly, you come across challenges at sea, you face setbacks, yet you keep going. I like to know what exactly keeps you guys going. What's the actual thing that keeps you guys motivated to start that engine once more, and set sail to the open sea, even with all the past challenges that you had a hard time to get over?
Well, my book, every one of my books has major challenges in it. We've been in 5 countries for 3 months or more, 5 different countries for 3 months or more, waiting just for boat parts because we've had breakages. And you get to the point where it's just part of the process. And our resolve is to get around this planet. Like, we don't have a home to go back to. Our kids have homes, they would take us in, but we don't have a home to go back to. We don't have jobs to go back to. This is our job. And when you embrace it and you internalize it and you've put as much into it as we've put into it, you're not going to give up. We got to be dead or our boat has to be sunk. Like, there's just nothing that's going to stop us at this point. I won't say nothing, but this is hardships, and we can overcome them and continue. We're good to go.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Indeed, it's one marked by resilience to keep going till the goal is achieved, and I really admire that. So, Alison, for someone listening right now in our audience who feels trapped by, the comfortable, secure life they built and is terrified of the uncharted waters ahead of them today. So, what's one step they can actually take, to start navigating their own transition?
Well, you have to be okay with going out of your comfort zone. And if there's something that you really want to do and you're letting comfort or fear stop you, that's the devil pulling at your heartstrings. You've got to realize that if you're going to live your best life and if you're going to achieve happiness, you've got to be willing to take risks. And it's just part of life. How happy are you going to be at the end of your life sitting there knowing that you didn't do everything that you could? And once you step out of your comfort zone and you go through a few trials and you overcome them, then you get stronger. So you have to be willing to accept that yes, it's going to be difficult. Yes, there's going to be challenges, but you just keep at it, and you're going to find yourself so liberated and so excited that you achieved what you wanted to achieve.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope it helps that listener, in a position where they need to hear this. So I like to know, for you and your husband, like, what does success really look like for you guys on this journey? What would you have achieved to say the journey is complete?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a very simple requirement. It's just crossing that line that we've been all the way around the world. When we go from here to New Zealand and Australia and up to Thailand and then down around Africa, when we cross underneath Africa and get to the west coast of Africa, we'll have made it around the world because we actually crossed the Atlantic in Cape Verde. So if we get up to Cape Verde, we'll have made it all the way around the world. And that's our goal. That will be success to us when we reach that point.
Fantastic, fantastic. I look forward to, that day where you guys finally reach the starting point and, can say you sailed across the entire world. That's a really amazing meaning you've attributed to success. So to wrap things up here, for everyone listening who is, ready to trade safety for adventure and they want to step into your world of travel and storytelling, where's the best place for them to go? Grab a copy of your book, Riding the Waves of Reality, and explore your blog.
So I have an author website, which is AlisonGieschen.com. And all of my books are there with links that you can click on them and read about them and buy them on Amazon. They're all available on Amazon. And I have children's books and fiction and nonfiction. And I write all genres because all of my story, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, are all based on my experiences and things that I've done and seen. So in a way, it's just I'm storytelling, whether it's not factual, but it's still true stories weaved in. And everybody can follow our sailing journey on my blog site, sailmates.org. And we also have a YouTube channel, Sailing Equus, where we have 100 videos, I think, of the places that we've been. And I just take the video camera out and show what we're doing and where we go and the different sites and things that we see. And I'm on Facebook, Alison Gieschen, and I do daily posts on Facebook and TikTok. And I just take videos and photos and put it to music. I also write music, and I do it on Suno, which is a music program. So I write all the lyrics and pick the music. So for instance, we went swimming with manta rays, which are like my spirit animal. And I made a beautiful song about manta rays to go with the video. So they're kind of fun. There's just a little piece of our life that people can see almost every day.
All right, Alison, it has indeed been a really interesting time having this conversation with you. Lots of wonderful stories you told about. And I am truly, truly honored to have you on the show today. Once again, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Ezekiel. I really appreciate being here.